It's a pleasure to welcome you all to yet another session of Mendel's bicentenary celebrations. I am Mercy Rofina, pursuing my PhD in Dr. Vinod Skaria's lab at CSIR IGIB. Today, it's an honor to have Professor Dhavendra Kumar, who is an honorary consultant in clinical genetics, cardiovascular genetics, inherited cardiac unit at St. Bart's Hospital, London. He is one of the globally acknowledged genetic and genomic clinician with special interest in clinical genetics and genomic medicine. His vast contributions to the field of human genetics is impossible to be quickly listed, so to mention a very few selected ones, he has been the recipient of various prestigious awards, including the Glory of Georgians and Lifetime Achievement Award. I must also mention that he's been the founding editor-in-chief of numerous biomedical journals and also multi-volume book series. So it's our pleasure and honor to have you here in this platform today, sir. Thanks a lot for joining us and accepting this invite to discuss your experiences and your opinions in this interview series.
Thank you, Mercy. It's a great pleasure to be part of this series, and I'm really grateful to you and your colleagues, especially my friend Vinod. I've known Vinod for a long time. A very active genetic genomic researcher in India. So I'm a clinician. I'm qualified in medicine from King George Medical College in Lucknow, and then pursued training in pediatrics. I did MD in pediatrics. So during MD, I was very keen on rare diseases and multiple malformation syndromes. But I never thought that one day I would spend my whole life in this field. So when I arrived in UK, just pure luck and pure chance, I found myself working in medical genetics at the University of Sheffield and also Sheffield Children's Hospital. So that's how I developed my career. So I always tell my colleagues and my friends. So when I started medical genetics, the technology was G banding karyotype. And when I retired, I'm not retired, but I retired from the active clinical practice. We were doing the exome sequencing. So that is in between. Those who know the field, many new technologies came and disappeared, or became dormant, but only very few maintained the place.
You started your career with a particular technique, and now there are a lot of advanced techniques coming into the field, and you have seen a broad range of techniques emerging, and you being a clinician and also very active in the research part, you would have seen a lot of families dealt with them, like with genetic disorders. So I would like to ask about your viewpoints or opinions about this whole stigma that is attached to the genetic disorders. Like when you treat a patient, like there needs to be more awareness. So what do you think about that particular topic, sir?
Yeah, it's a very good question. That takes us back to we are talking about we are celebrating the Gregor Mendel's 200 years of birth anniversary. So just consider what actually was an environment at that time when he used his gardening hobby and started doing the experiment, not only for a few months, but for many years, but good 10 years. What he tried to really unravel the fundamentals of life, biological life, using the garden pea as an example. Those fundamental principles of life, how the gametes, like the sperm and ovum in the mammalian life context, or pollen in the context of the plant, they receive the genetic material. It was not called genetic material, it was calling some kind of trait. And then how that is really passed on, and how, in what respect they behave. like the outcome. So there are three aspects. So that's why we got three laws of Mendel's law of inheritance,
True.
which as you know, beauty is now an eighth class student is able to understand. I mean, it was not in my curriculum when I was in eighth class. It was not even in 10th class, although I mean, out of interest because one of my project for the science talent research examination, which you know very well in India,
Mm.
and in the 11th class, I picked up a common butterfly
Okay.
and used the life cycle. And
Mm.
then I read about that at that time about Gregor Mendel's work. So, so that is, but even at that time, he was not allowed
Mm.
to discuss in open. I mean, his work was paper were destroyed, as you know. I mean, he was, yeah, I mean, during his lifetime, he never got any fame.
True, sir.
Similarly, if you go back much earlier, Charles Darwin, about 25, 30 years before Gregor Mendel's work, and he spent all 3, 4 years going around on the many seas and collected evidence for he had theory of evolution, selection, and the origin of species. He was not allowed to talk about that.
Right.
He was not for 25 years. He had to keep his work actually hidden, and in a under the floor in the wooden because they will come and search, you know, because not allowed. He was called anti against the god, and so similarly when we started making diagnosis of genetic conditions,
Mm.
we knew that it was a genetic condition, but we didn't have any way to prove it.
So,
When we had the chromosomes discovered, and although Down syndrome, trisomy 21, was known by Dr. Down in France, he described that a few years before. But as soon as we had a chromosome technique available, people found that it was because of the extra chromosome or 21 pair, so trisomy 21. And then that became a big stigma.
yeah.
Oh, that means this mother must have got a bad chromosome, or that's how it came along. And nobody thought it was because of anybody, even father could have the balanced rearrangement for that. So the world stigma is correct, and then gradually we moved on. When we had after the um, after Garrard's in Oxford theory of metabolic disease in inborn errors of metabolism, then we came across many metabolic conditions.
Okay.
And those metabolic conditions, for example, the autosomal recessive conditions were picked up in families where there was a lot of intermarriage, cousin marriage.
Right.
So it became a stigma there. I mean, it was a very difficult time. And initially, genetic counseling, which started in the first genetic counseling clinic, was held in 1948 in London, followed by another clinic in America, in New York, Cold Spring Harbor Lab. So we have moved from there to the present stage, and we have got, as you know, about 4,000 diseases, which are called Mendelian diseases. Victor McCusick started listing those conditions with a catalog called the MIM, the Mendelian Inheritance in Man.
Okay.
MIM, now it's called OMIM now at present, which is online. So the stigma world still applies, as you know. I mean, if you go across, a child is born with a syndrome, and then a mother is the one who is looking after the child. Mother is surrounded by all other, sadly, women in the family, and then she gets the blame. But we geneticists know that what's the origin? It is a natural thing. It could happen to anyone. It's nobody's fault. So we have developed as a clinician. I was in a very good position to take part in the development of a profession which is called genetic counseling.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time it was not there. I mean, we were in my place in Sheffield. We got a 2 years research project. So, I mean, there was no. It was not called genetic counselor. It's called genetic nurse at that time.
Okay.
And so we developed a 2 year project, and then gradually became obvious that we needed a bridge from the lab. Lab will report to us, to the doctor, and doctor was reporting to the patient or mother, I mean, or parents.
Hmm.
But beyond that, there was no other way to communicate.
True. True.
So if you look at the process, the lab was rapidly moving. So we have got G banding now. We can do the prometaphase banding. We can do the fish and all those things. They were moving much more rapidly, like even now. I mean, people are talking about, oh, well, let's do the RNA sequencing, whole genome sequencing. Similarly, in those days, and we were also inundated with many new diagnoses, and we were finding ways uh, to, to inform doctors, clinicians, and parents. The difficulty was how to go beyond the patient, how to go back to the family, how to go back to the community. That's where we gradually developed genetic counseling as an important part of our service, our field. As you know now, genetic counselor. I mean, there's plenty in India now. Although there is a huge number shortage,
Yeah.
but it's happening. It's a good thing.
Yeah, sir. So it was really an interesting recap of how you took the whole effort of taking the information from the workflow which you told, from a laboratory to a clinical setup, a medical setup, and getting back to the patient's family, especially the parents. So that was a very, very insightful point which you had stated, sir. And so on the same note, since we also know that we all know that you've been a founder and the editor-in-chief of a lot of journals and books. So I personally feel that books are a kind of medium which takes the science knowledge to a mass. It's like it's a kind of delivering the awareness to the public. So do you think that had really impacted, like the awareness through books, the knowledge we put in books have really impacted the public to know more about the genetic disorders or genetics per se?
Yeah, I mean, the books are the integral part of education
True.
at any level. We start. You have a young baby. I mean, 6 months old, even 3 months old, and 1 month old, whatever. You have pictures and books. They start reading books, bedtime stories, and all those things. So
Yes.
books are part of the education, communication. Setting examples, and all the many facets of that. Um, I think the last 15 years or so, because of emphasis on the research and research publications and rapid changes in the knowledge. So books were a little bit, I think, became out of sort of importance, or
Right.
out of favorite way of communicating. But without books, you can't really you can't deliver the curriculum
True.
at whatever level you're talking about. Fine, I mean, as a higher level, like your level, PhD level, you might say, well, I don't need books. But just my point is that when a fresh um, person comes to you
True.
after doing MSc, and then and asking for a research, and I've got a research topic, a project, I mean, which is, say, in cardiology. My area, cardiovascular genetics, is my special interest. So a person has no knowledge of it. So where will I start? I will say, okay, well, I've done this book on cardiovascular genetics. I've got 3 books now in that field. So I will say, okay, please take this book and go through. And then this is the area we are interested, and then try to read in more detail. We'll discuss that later. So
Okay.
that becomes like a starting point. So there are many ways. I strongly believe that despite so many journals, thousands of papers published every week or in different journals, and books are the only way where you can have factual information, hardcore knowledge.
True.
You need to have, must have.
Yes. Is going to remain as a basic amenity for any education, be it the basic education or in higher education sector. So that was really very, very insightful of you to state, sir. So on the same notes, since you've been in research for such a long time and there's a lot of advancements popping up in the either in the technologies or in the diagnostics, what, according to you, do you think can be the future advancement in this field, especially in our nation? What can be the advancement so that it can shape the national health policies in a better way?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, many people in India, they know me. I don't think I've ever met you before, but in your department also, your director, previous director, Professor Samir Brahmachari, my old friend. We go back many years together, and we used to discuss, and then now Dr. Mitali Mukherjee and Sridhar, Vinod, and many people I know in your institute.
Yes,
they
sir.
know about my interest. So about 12 years ago, I developed a program called Indo-UK Genetic Education Forum. So with that program, we started expanding and talking to clinicians, talking to scientists in India about educational aspects. And then now we have got the same program is now much more bigger called UK-India Genomic Medicine Alliance.
Okay.
And then, so that is, again, all aspects of genetics and genomics, and depending upon there's a well-established institute like yours, and compared to somebody who is starting fresh. So accordingly, we can give them some advice and some directions and some help in the planning. So that's what we are trying to achieve, and working with the Board of Genetic Counseling in India, helping them how to really modernize their training in genetic counseling. I strongly believe India needs more genetic counselors because they are very flexible and they're less years to train compared to somebody who's a medical person who's going to get a DM in medicine. That's a long process. I think in a fraction of time you can train a genetic counselor, and genetic counselor is a very, very important bridge.
Yeah, right.
Between researchers, clinicians, lab. Just imagine it. The way they work, there is a researcher like yourself. You are a researcher, you want patients for your research. Where will you go? You come to me, and I'm very busy. If you get a genetic counselor, you go to genetic counselor, and he or she will help you. And then they know how to work with the lab, and then also other clinicians, and plus families, and then other families in the community. Right. So they are the people India needs that because it's such a large country, I mean, to train doctor and then make a DM or DNB take many years, a lot of money required, that's my view. So we are helping in that respect, and I'm very closely associated with the global Variome project and Human Genome Organization. So I currently, fortunately, chair the Genomic Education Committee, and we are the primary focus. My focus is low and middle income countries.
Okay.
And so we are very keen how this science is delivered. So the gap is narrowed. There's a huge gap in what we do in UK, USA, Europe. Is a huge gap. I mean, people sitting like yourself, when you see the gap, and then you get very frustrated. And look at the patient, when they see Google, this is technology. What is this technology? Why is it not available in India? Because Google has really brought the world just on the screen.
True, sir.
I mean, in the past, you had to go through papers and library. No, you just see the screen, you can find what's happening. So that's what we are trying to achieve, and then of course apart from the education curriculum, apart from developing the practice guidelines, and within the practice guidelines, the important part is the ethical. What you're doing, what you do should be correct, should be should reflect the science, not like modified science, distorted science. Some people have a habit of like a shortcut, and then it becomes it looks nice. Or a lab will say, come to you, well, I can offer this whole exome sequencing for half the money. The question is that, do they have the right kind of software to write the report?
Right.
Yes. And are they doing themselves? Are they going somewhere else? So all these you have to look at. So we are also advising the lab, about the right kind of practice. So and other thing, which is I think important from, because you're a researcher, and what India is really lagging behind. I think in purpose-built research projects or clinical trials or randomized research randomization of different areas, and to get more relevant data which is applicable to Indian people, Indian populations.
Like you had even very valid points, starting from how is it to be ethical and how to take it forward, bringing more population specific results and population specific projects which would have a greater impact and benefit for the Indian population. So this brings me to the end of this session of discussion with you, sir. So I'm asking if you have any kind of motivation message or a kind of encouragement note which you would like to give for researchers or students on this occasion. We are like very eager to hear from you.
Well, thank you, Mercy. It's a very important question, and science is a broad field. I've spent my time in biology, life sciences, mainly in genetics, and medical science in pediatrics. But there are some core messages which will apply to every student anywhere, especially in the less resourced nation like, and although India is improving, but still, because of diversity and the large country, large population size, so not everywhere we have the same kind of facilities. So students who are coming to study medicine or science, and they need to, first of all, which is very obvious, they need to get their facts right and in the correct manner, in the correct order. And the tendency to have a shortcut, and then you can certainly pass the exam. You can sometimes pass the exam in good sort of marks, but that will leave some gaps in your understanding and knowledge. In my experience, these gaps will always manifest. Sometimes they manifest in a very unexpected way, and then you can fail that interview, you not get the job, because you don't know, other person might ask the same question, and you will find yourself in the trap. Then you will say, well, I did so well, still there's some language, this thing, you can always have humanly explanation. So that's number one. Number two, if you are going for clinical or sort of practical application of science in a job situation, then you need to have proper vocational training. And without training, you jump into that, and you are likely to fail, or you'll not make progress. Many examples that somebody came fresh, very young person, with the proper training, was given a preference, and you would be sitting there and you were very angry, the family very upset, you could not get the promotion. You know what I mean? These are practical things. In the research setting, which is quite a challenging area, it's very tempting. The research outcomes are measured on the quality of your research. You can get a PhD, you can write a thesis, and here and there, and by whatever means. But unless the research has some impact or area outcome, nobody will make any notice.
Right.
And publications are important aspects of judging the research, but that's not true. Sometimes, people have not published, but they have got outcome. They can go straight for patent.
Right.
And then they can have these days, there's a lot of encouragement from the Prime Minister. I was quite, what do you call the startups? Startups. Many good students especially in the field of computing, Silicon Valley. If you ask them, they stopped their PhD. They didn't complete it.
Right.
They didn't complete it. They found something. Then they did a startup and made millions.
Right.
So yeah, of course, I'm not saying that you stop PhD or stop your research. Complete it by all means. But I think you have to be looking at actively, and just don't go. Don't think, oh, I've got this lifetime job. It will give me pension. Like recently, there was a lot of hoo-ha about very disturbing young boys and going out and burning trails because the job plan offered by, I don't know what was a scheme called Samagani something.
Okay.
And so they were misguided.
Right.
And politicians and family, they're misguiding them. If you have a lifetime job at the age of 18, 19 years, you finish. You can't make progress.
Right.
There is no incentive.
Right.
I mean, you are doing PhD, you'll be, after PhD, you have to start looking around. And you go to postdoc for 2 years.
Yeah.
From postdoc, you'll go somewhere else. That's a life.
Right.
So they have to be prepared for that.
Okay.
So these boys and girls who were very frustrated, we'll spend 4 years and then we'll be out without any pension. It's nonsense. So similarly, in the field of science, you should never think that if you've got a lifetime job, yes, okay, fine, you've got a lifetime job. You can get married and have family and have pension, all those things. But you can't make progress. That's very, very, very true. You'll be reading other progress. So my classmate is now doing director or professor, or but you have to look at how that person, your classmate, what kind of career the person pursued. Coming to the field of genetics and genomics, it's a huge field. I mean, every day you hear about new treatment, new therapies, every day, and there is a tremendous scope. And I would encourage, but it's not going to happen in the 2-3 years. You got to pursue it. You got to make it I keep looking for opportunities, and most of these opportunities are never next door, never.
Okay.
They are far away.
Okay, sir.
And so don't be afraid of that. Of course, family will be a little bit upset. Okay, my son is going away, my daughter is going away. But all these are practical messages, I think, which I would like to convey. I mean, look at the example. 60 years, nobody talked about his research, Gregor Mendel research. Right. 60 years. And it was William Bateson in London, in the University College London, the Galton Lab. And the director of the Galton Lab used to be the grandnephew of Charles Darwin. And he knew about Mendel's work. So he encouraged William Bateson to, they found a PhD student and gave the project to them. The job was to go to that place in church and find out, dig out all papers. That's how it was reinvented.
Okay.
So fame may not come to you easily. I think what more example do you need? 60 years. Now we talk about him, but for many years, nobody talked about him. Right. Nobody. Right. Many other examples, scientists, plenty of scientists, you hear also should have got the Nobel Prize. People name many people in India who should have got the Nobel Prize, but didn't get it.
Mhm.
But at least you're talking about a person. That's fame.
True, sir.
It's not that the person did not get the Nobel Prize. That's one factor. But
Right.
we are aware of the person's work.
Yeah.
So I think there's a few practical messages which I want to convey. And
Yes.
whenever I read Gregor Mendel, and I read when I was in 10th class, part of my science talent, project. And I never thought I'll spend my whole life in genetics. And whenever I read, I've read many papers. This paper, I think I read it recently, you might have seen that.
Okay.
Beautiful paper, worth reading.
Okay.
How did Mendel arrive at his discoveries? That's a title.
Okay.
So I think this paper should be read by every science student.
Sure.
They want to really know
Okay.
about the research and to achieve something.
Yeah, true, sir. So it's a pleasure and honor having you here for this discussion, sir. Thanks a lot for joining and also sharing your viewpoints and very, very interesting and valid points for the young generation or people who aspire to take science for their career. It was really an honor having you here in this interview series, sir. Thanks a lot for joining.
It's pleasure, as it's an honor.